So hello everybody. My name's Lance Vikaros. I've been working in the industry for almost 25 years. Got started in high school at a company called Grolier, moving over to Scholastic. I've been doing educational software. I helped the MIT team out with kind of community management of their Scratch programming online community. But what I'm going to be talking to you about today is my more recent work with both Agnitus and now Lumosity, as well as some past work with Lexia Learning. Now, all three of these companies have something in common. They provide platforms that combine many different types of educational games into a giant system that you might call an intelligent tutoring system. And these combinations of games provide like an ongoing learning experience that goes across a single play experience. So you play a game, it's going to adaptively get harder and easier as you go. Depending on how you perform, it's going to then recommend new games for you to play. And over time, it's going to try to kind of take you from, say, a novice level in some kind of a skill, whether it's math, language, or a cognitive ability, and advance you to a more sophisticated level. And it's going to try to do it at your own personalized pace. Now, in this whole realm of adaptivity and educational learning games and neurogames, and you're going to notice that I don't make a big distinction between the two. One thing they both have in common is that they are games designed to improve your brain, improve how your brain functions. The biggest difference is going to be what it is within the brain that you're kind of focusing on. If it's crystallized knowledge, the kind of knowledge that you gain over time, it's the kind of knowledge you typically associate with school learning. So that's the kind of thing that's been shown to kind of accumulate over your life, and it continues to get better. There's then the fluid intelligence, which a lot of what neurogaming focuses on. Those are core cognitive abilities that are going to try to give you stronger foundational, quicker thinking skills, stronger memory skills, the ability and strategy to remember things. And if it's not kind of an innate skill, then strategies you can use, like the memory palace, for figuring out how you can rehearse or do other little mental tricks for improving memory and other types of things that help your real world activities. Now, in advertising technology like this, you're going to see a lot of adjectives. They are not always well defined, and so our objective today is to try to dig into this. I want to help you understand what's the difference. What does it mean when someone says adaptivity? What does it mean if it's personalized? How much does it work? Does it work? When is it appropriate, if you're a designer or a developer, when are you going to want to introduce this into your own technology? Should you take on extra production costs to make it a more personalized experience? And there's trade-offs. We're going to talk about these trade-offs, and we're going to think about what the future of this area might be. What can we expect to see? So adaptivity, what is it? Specifically in apps, you'll also find adaptivity as kind of a conversation topic in instructional pedagogy, so how teachers go about teaching. But a definition that I'm going to start from is one that EdSurge and Pearson have come together to put forth. They got this by interviewing over 40 educators, school administrators, and designers of neurogames and other educational tech. The crux of it is that the interaction within the game is changing in real time to adapt to your performance. So as you play, something is changing to make the experience catered to your level. So why have it? Now, to answer this question, I'm going to kind of get into the history of education just a little bit. I'd like to talk about some finding that Benjamin Bloom announced in the 80s. Now, at this time, let's see, I think not Seymour Papert. Seymour Papert out of MIT had written a book called Mindstorms. And this inspired schools to begin adopting computers into their curriculum. Programs called Logo was one of the first of his variety. Later, the same team that did Logo invented Scratch and Lego Mindstorms. So in the continuum of bringing computers into schools, at the same time, we had discovered or had a finding to show that tutoring seemed to improve education by 2 standard deviations. Now, what's the significance of 2 standard deviations? This is a unit statisticians use to describe within a population. Because learning is so personalized, you can't just say, oh, it worked twice as well or 3 times as well as some other product. You really, across all studies, you have to talk in terms of how much did an improvement happen compared to some kind of baseline, some median or mean standard within a group that you're looking at and working with. So 2 standard deviations is equivalent to moving someone from the 50th percentile to the 97th percentile. Now, this was a finding that kind of inspired people to understand, well, how do we improve education? How do we find a form of education that is the most effective approach possible? And the issue was that schools don't seem to be working towards hitting that 2 standard deviation objective. This is fabulous. If we could do this for every single student, we would see 97th percentile kind of improvements. But unfortunately, schools don't work that way. You have the kind of one-size-fits-all approach that came out of a Taylor-inspired factory model education. And it's difficult. Like, at the same time that technology was entering schools, that we discovered tutoring to have the benefits that it does, we also were talking about multiple intelligences and the ways in which learners learn very differently. This is something neurologists have known, educators have known. It's hard to quantify, but unfortunately with schools, we just don't have the kind of resources to put a single teacher for every single student. We've tried to figure out ways of increasing that one-to-one attention, but there's limitations within public schooling and even after K through 12 or higher learning, whether it's workplace training. So this presents the problem that Adaptivity is aiming to solve. We're trying to achieve that profound benefit that you find with some forms of tutoring, or has been shown sometimes with tutoring. And we're trying to achieve it, but if we can't do it by having an extra person in the room for every single student, why not education, or why not technology? And the crux between tutoring and traditional instruction, what's the difference between the two? And I'm going to claim that it's adaptivity. So adaptivity seems to be a potential direction we can go in to solve this. Unfortunately, a lot of studies into digital tutoring have started in the 70s, and the costs have been high. This is my little chart. The volume on the left is kind of showing the amount of what it is we're seeing, the orange being adaptivity. This is an estimate based on my own designs and my own development experience. Now, what you're going to see is some bumps here. When you're moving from passive media, televisions, let's say, or some kind of video-based learning, there's going to be a bump. Do we have the pointer? Let's see. So there's going to be a bump right there where you go from a passive media to interactive media. Now, that's the extra developmental cost of just having interactivity in general. If you're going to be doing game-based interactive apps, you're going to have to invest that extra effort to make your apps interactive. Now, adaptivity, from an instructional point of view, begins to grow. And I'm going to be talking about this area right here, the area where you actually can kind of benefit from the amount of production that you're going to be doing just to have interactivity in your games in general, but without getting into the very sophisticated machine learning-based AI that the most advanced tutoring systems will feature. At the top level, these tutoring systems are often found in research labs, but you end up having to spend 5 to 10 years for like 5 minutes of tutoring instruction. So the kind of cost benefit in that has not yet come down. Maybe with things like Watson, we're going to see the costs of the complete virtual tutor lowering, but for now, we're really looking at that kind of sweet spot in the middle. So to get to the kind of hands-on of what I'd like to get into is now from the design perspective. What are the different types of interactivity and adaptivity? Where are they going to be featured in your games? And I'm going to describe them in terms of 3 things. The action, the activity that you do as a player, the feedback that you receive, and how the experience is going to change from moment to moment, the progression. Now, within educational apps, if they're not game-based, you'll often see kind of a three-piece flow. You're going to go from instruction, kind of didactic. There's some degree of lecturing or information that you need to start off, the activity or assessment, and then the feedback. Now, one of the beauties of using a game-based approach is assessment becomes invisible. You can test a person as they're learning. Not to mention, you can remove the passive aspect of instruction and make it interactive. There are limits in this kind of transition because you're limiting the amount of abstract information you can kind of give to a user in an interactive way, but allows for more inferential-based learning, which often is shown to transfer and to increase the long-term duration of what it is you learned. So if that's just the microtransaction, the exact thing you do within a single moment of gameplay, what happens over time? And this is where you begin to see leveling, let's say. That you start off at a very easy level. The mechanics might be simple. You might only be doing one kind of simple task at a moment. And then from one moment to the next, depending on how you perform, the interaction is going to be different. Maybe you're now at a higher level. Maybe the activity has changed. But there's going to be a flow of these microtransactions happening over time in something of a cyclical format. Learning is gradual. It happens over time, and it requires a certain degree of repetition. So in the big picture, how does that model translate into design? So as an example from the Agnitus phonics program I designed for kindergarten students, I started off working with teachers to kind of figure out what are all the little mini transactions, mini tasks you can perform, and what the language arts specialists recommend is doing many of these tasks in conjunction with one another, kind of in the Sesame Street approach. If you're going to focus on a sound like the soft short vowel A, and you're going to be doing it, say, with letters that begin with C, or you're going to be doing rhymes, you're going to want to do a lot of these in conjunction with one another so you get the same type of content and ideas, but in different tasks. So I'm always going to be recommending variety in what you do. But here's kind of the context in a learning perspective. So even though we're going to take a look at examples from single games, I'd like you to know that adaptivity lives, hopefully, in a context of many different activities combined together. And when this happens, and when it happens in schools with teachers guiding the experience, helping students reflect on what it is they're doing within the games, that's when you get to see the benefits that are approaching a tutoring, or the benefits of tutoring. So that was the example from Agnitus, and that loop was a loop of like 5 to 10 different games that are occurring in conjunction, one after the other. And then here is a larger roadmap going across language, math, science, and social emotional development. Agnitus is a platform you can find on the App Store for preschool, kindergarten, and first grade. But now I want to move over to specific examples of adaptivity within kind of at the level of the task. And these examples are being pulled from Lumosity's platform. Very similarly, it has about 50 to 60 different types of games. And then the app itself, the platform, will watch what you do and in which games you're doing it. It's going to keep track of your performance in the past to try to change what the difficulty and the content you receive in future play sessions. Now here, I talked about the 3 different types, the interactivity, the assessment, the feedback within the loop of an activity. So adaptivity can occur in what it is you're doing, the actual way you're controlling or making a decision within an activity. The mechanics can escalate as you go. In our Trouble Brewing game, you have to look at the orders up on top, and now you're going to be fulfilling the orders like in a diner dash style. If someone is asking for a double shot of espresso, you have to use the machine below to fill up a cup of double espresso, while then using your 4 limited machines to fulfill the orders. And over time, the orders begin to be shown on one screen, and you have to jump back and forth between 2 screens where you're fulfilling the order and where you're getting the order. So now it becomes kind of a memory task. So in these ways, you're dynamically increasing the challenge. With racing, the speed of racing increases. With our language games, you have additional feedback being given that tells you how well you've done, what words you had in the past that are now you're getting right. The performance in one play of a game can jump you up multiple levels at a time. And essentially, over time, your learning curve is being modeled by the game design. So what ends up happening is, and here's kind of a perspective of the range of adaptivity types of curves you will program or design within your game. A linear stepwise approach is essentially you move up one level at a time every time you successfully perform a transaction. It's not entirely accurate as far as how we learned. You often get diminishing returns in a logarithmic scale. So essentially, you want the difficulty of your app to start off taking large jumps and then smaller jumps over time. Now, with age, that curve has to be shifted so that everyone's going to be learning in some kind of logarithmic fashion, but one person's logarithmic curve will not be the same as someone else's. And this is where adaptivity comes in, that you want to assess the player's performance and adjust the scale of the curve at the time. So how well does it work? In effect sizes, we have seen tutoring and interactive games beginning to show the effect and benefits similar to tutoring. And the context matters. Educational support, combinations of exercise and a high level of challenge being provided throughout the experience has often been critical to getting those high benefits. And then Ghazali's lab is probably the future of where we see this industry going, or at least where we see the research of it going, combining neural imaging with gameplay performance. And he found that with training, older adults, their brain could show an activity level similar to untrained younger adults. I think it was over the course of 5 weeks of training by playing a racing game similar to one of the racing games I had just shown. So that's my talk. I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what adaptivity is, how it varies along the spectrum, and maybe in time we're going to see that virtual tutor for every person through some combination of technologies already out there. So thank you very much.